Now, the Kang book was actually a pleasant surprise, personally, for me. Kang had a recent stint on Avengers, which, to be fair, wasn't really that recent. As I think it was further back, a few years ago, which was, in my personal opinion, pretty freaking boring, and I really didn't enjoy it at all, which did leave a bad taste in my mouth about Kang. But ultimately, he's been on the show Loki, and Marvel are going to capitalize on that with his book here. This is a very, very good book. It's very wordy at times, but it's definitely a book that if you like Kang or you're interested about Kang, you really should read. It's only the first issue just yet, but it really gives you a very good first impression. Now, the opening page, obviously, with Kang here, it talks about how a time traveler went back in time and tells the great Alexander that there's a lot of planets out there, basically, and there's a lot to conquer. And this ends up putting Alexander to tears, and he's like, you know what, I can't even conquer one planet. Never mind infinite freaking planets out there that are ready to conquer and ready to be conquered. I mean, that ends up putting Alexander to tears. Now, this also plays into the fact that Kang's the Conqueror. Now, we get thrown all the way back in time, or into the future, more like, into the 31st century with Nathaniel Richards, who would obviously grow up to be Kang. Now, this again is pretty decent freaking writing. He tells that they were born in an age called post scarcity, and that his planet was a very it was full of pleasure. It was a pretty calm planet, and the problem was it was a utopia, and people out there. I mean, it doesn't matter if you got your throat slit. Ultimately, you would heal pretty freaking quickly. The planet had gotten so far in life that people had calmed down, and again, this also plays into the fact that if there's no pain, there is no gain. The world doesn't move if everything's fine. If nothing's going wrong, you will not go out to fix it, and that's the thing with Nathaniel's Utopia planet. It ultimately comes to the point where the planet was doing so freaking well, no one wanted to progress. They were like, this is just perfectly freaking fine. Now, Nathaniel had clocked onto the fact that, yeah, this is a cage, you know, the fact that we're not allowed to progress here. We're not even built to progress. Everything's perfectly fine. We're just out living our lives. Now, ultimately, Nathaniel ends up going into one of Doctor Doom's castles. Kang brings up the fact that Doom's an imbecile. Now, Kang and Doctor Doom do hang out quite a bit, which is pretty funny. They just hang out every now and then, and just like, yeah, he's just vibing. But I mean, he brings up the fact that good engineering is obviously eternal when one of the Doom bots attacks Nathaniel Richards, who is also in that castle, and he ends up sending the Doom bot to the 20th century. Now, I'm pretty sure Doom himself was born in the 20th century. Probably a better idea to send it into the 21st century, because I mean, I'm pretty sure people would clock onto the fact that yes, that is a Doom bot instead of the 20th century. You might just say about to like 1903. Just have a Doombot hanging around there being useless. That would have been mad. Ultimately, Nathaniel ends up being a bit cocky. He's like, yeah, I'm out here liberating a blimmin' library. It's a bit wacky. Kang's like, yeah, it is a bit embarrassing how you're revering it, how you're absolutely celebrating, how you're absolutely loving the fact that you have just gone and blimmin' conquered this. I mean, ultimately, this is Kang himself. He's done quite a lot, and Kang gives him offer. He's like, "Do you want to make history, or do you want to read it, or do you just want to make it?" You know. Nathaniel's like, "You know what? I love this." And he's like, "Let's go back to 65 million freaking years ago, to the death of the dinosaurs, or technically a year before that." And obviously, again, just a shit ton of dinosaurs knocking about, doing their thing, which does happen a lot in interpretations, but probably didn't happen that much in real life. Ultimately, Kang's like, what do we do now? We're probably going to run out of time. And Kang's like, you have a year to basically survive. the apocalypse. I'm gonna teach you how to be a Kang. Now, Nathaniel, obviously, this is the younger Kang. That's the older Kang. This is the younger Kang. We obviously know that he is gonna end up surviving and becoming the older man himself. Now, he ultimately, yeah, he's out here killing a lot of dinosaurs, and Kang does tell him about a lot of the losses that he had ended up taking to the hands of the Avengers, or to the hands of, a lot of other people that he's battled across time and space. And he basically wants Nathaniel to be much better, to be a better Kang than he ever was. Ultimately, Nathaniel ends up killing a Tyrannosaur. He blows the head off that thing, and he ended up saving a woman. Before that happened, Kang ultimately talks about how he lost his wife, Ravonna. Kang brings up a very important lesson, which is to never love, because, yeah, it's like how he says it, in all of time and space, it's the only way in which you'll end up being conquered, through love. That's just how it is. That's the only thing that can bring down a Kang, being in love. And he basically beats that into Nathaniel. Nathaniel ends up saving the woman. He ends up really freaking liking her, and ends up following her back to the tribe where they're all hanging out. They decided to end up judging his heart. You will be a conqueror, and you'll also be conquered. She ends up marking him as well for saving the lives here. Nathaniel goes back home and tells Kang about all the people he saved. He's like, it's pretty freaking insane that people are out here before the death of the dinosaurs, which is a bit weird because people are meant to, be here afterwards. He's pretty surprised about that. He goes back home and tells Kang about everything he's been through. And he's like, you know what? Just let it out, Nathaniel. Just say it. And he's like, love. And Kang literally just smacks him. And he's like, no, that's not what you're here for. That's a big no. No. And yeah, Kang's like, you know what? Nathaniel's like, you know what? I saved them. I saved them. And Kang's like, you know what? You sure as hell did not save them. And he goes out and he kills the villagers one by one. Nathaniel realizes in that moment that he had not been released from the cage that he was in the 31st century. He realized the cage that he was in now was Kang himself. Now, this leads to practically the end of the book, where Nathaniel realizes the only way for him to get out of there is to basically steal Kang's suit and get off the freaking planet. Now, before the asteroid strikes, ultimately he steals the suit. It sort of doesn't fit, and he leaves Kang behind, ultimately killing off Kang. This is the birth of Kang and the death of Kang at the same time. Now he steals the suit, basically ends up making it fit. He realizes that the suit's an absolute freaking mess and it probably won't survive that long, and he ends up at Ramatut's empire, which is also a phase in Kang's life when he was out here being Ramatut and battling the Fantastic Four in Egypt. So all in all, a really good book, and I would actually recommend it. And yeah, I'm going to keep an eye on this book for further issues as well.